Right, everyone, I'm Klloo. So, this has to be a pretty highly anticipated, right, scheduled banned and restricted announcement, because not only does it influence, obviously, the current meta going to ICs, but it is also the direct result of everything that has been talked about recently, right, with the most recent dev talk and Living Legends. This is the effective change that we, again, want to hopefully see in some extent, right? So we'll come back to the actual cards that are being restricted, unrestricted, slash banned, and we're going to jump straight to the Living Legends stuff, right? Because this is the big shakeup. So we'll read it, then we'll discuss it, and then we'll come back to the banned stuff. So going forward, two major changes will occur with the Living Legend point distribution. First off, fractional Living Legend points will be kept track of in the gem backend to mitigate the effect of excessive rounding. So for reference, at ProQuest Singapore, points were awarded as 2.51, which I also find kind of weird, right? If it's a draw, shouldn't it just be 2525, right? But either way, that was rounded up to 3, right, for both heroes, I would assume, meaning that they got a little marginal boost, right? So to prevent that, they will now keep track of the decimal places, and that will then tie into the other big change, which is Living Legend points will be subject to a multiplier, right? That scales over a hero's lifespan. So, during the first year of legality, a hero's earned Living Legend points will be halved. During the second year, they will have no multiplier, and then in all other subsequent years, they will be multiplied by 1.5, right? So, before we jump to the rationale, let's just take a look at what that effectively means. So, this is Living Legend beforehand. This is it updated, right? Color-coded, so if I've incorrectly done a hero, do forgive me, but red is the 2+ year, right? So the generational heroes, if you will, that are now at that 1.5 times multiplier. Yellow, the 1 times multiplier. I've kept new as yellow, right? Coming into the actual high seas season. That will be when Miss Val hits that year mark, right? So then she'll jump up to 1 times, but currently she would still be with the less than a year. And then green is the less than a year at the half multiplier. So in terms of points earned, right, it means that for the World Championship, it's 50, 100, and 150 now instead of just 100, right? And then at the low end at ProQuest, it's 2.5, 5, and 7.5. So overall, right, looking at the color coordination, this is kind of what we want to see, right? There's red at the top, yellow in the middle, and predominantly green down the bottom. Obviously, as this effect continues to maintain its order, that should help spread out more evenly, right? Except in the case of, obviously, say, the bottom barrel heroes, where this will effectively not help them at all, right? This does nothing to actually change meta or card quality or toolkits, right? It's just a stopgap, if you will, right? To take someone like Florian, who could potentially ally by the end of the year, and make sure he doesn't, right? So the general idea is to slow things down and create a certainty for new heroes. Now, whether or not that's correct is definitely up for debate and discussion. So, as mentioned in our recent dev talk, the Living Legend system is a unique experience in the history of TCGs, and one that is successfully serving as the narrative backbone of our entire tournament circuit, right? This is how we get rotation, right? And different card pools going in and out of legality. However, we can't ignore the fact that having a hero rotate too soon after release can create an undue hardship for our players. Yes, but again, is point distribution the correct call, or would be actually, say, gutting their deck, right? Well, not gutting, but obviously reining it in, the better call. Simply put, you should have the confidence that new heroes have an acceptable amount of time where they can be played in Blitz and Classic Constructed tournaments before they move on to their forever home in the non-hero rotating formats. To achieve this goal, the following multipliers will be in effect from June 5th. So overall, this update, along with the increased cadence of bans, should help us avoid outcomes like the rapid ascension of Aurora Shooting Star in the future, while keeping a healthy number of points flowing into the Living Legend system. As always, we intend to closely monitor the outcome and adjust again to best serve fans of Flesh and Blood. So, generally speaking, Living Legend has gone through multiple iterations over and over in terms of the points, right? And this is seemingly where LSS sort of knuckled down and go, this is the big portion we can change. And in all honesty, the first time I read this, right, cool. It is the change that they talked about, right? And it's not a essentially bad way to do it. But the more I think about the points. It's just adding another variable that LSS can't control, right? So when it comes to, again, Living Legend and the point system, right, they control the heroes, they control essentially the card pools, right? So the card quality and therefore the meta. Hopefully, again, there's rigorous testing to back that up. What they don't control is community adoption and how that community presents in the different levels of competition. So by essentially adding these multipliers, you are enabling, right, heroes that again have the excessive card pool. So yes, this gives LSS an ample opportunity to check them, right, to then restrict cards and then allow them to continue to be played, but with the reduced ability to earn a high level of points. However, when it comes to the other end of the system, and this is the part that I really dislike, when they hit that 1.5 times multiplier, right, that is essentially meaning that any bottom barrel hero, again, going back to our chart, all those yellows that are going to turn red, right, if they eventually ever get a proper card pool that actually makes them competitive, then all of a sudden, they are speeding up, right? So a hero finally becomes decently playable, but it's now subject to that 1.5 times multiplier, so they're penalized for finally being able to perform adequately, right? So I get the idea of essentially making sure a hero doesn't LL within X amount of months from its release, or in this case, it seems like a year plus is the scenario, but I don't like the other end of it penalizing underperforming heroes, and that once they get, again, a proper effective toolkit to utilize, it's going to speed up their living legend progression. So while on one side of the coin, giving agency to the player base is fantastic, this system now impacts all the other aspects of living legend. So for instance, the specific amounts of points that LSS wants to be handing out every season gets just a monkey wrench thrown into it, right? Because again, depending on the community, the adoption of X hero, and how that hero then affects the points that they're earning, we go from a set amount given out each season to now, again, sometimes it being more, sometimes it being less. And overall, as this continues on, right, as this version of the system is put into effect for a longer and longer period, that type of toll is definitely going to continue to rack up. So it's a hard-ask scenario, right? Because again, it is a new system. It's a system that we do really much enjoy, right? Rather than having, again, standard rotation of sets. But if there is a specific time frame that LSS have in mind, then again, wouldn't this be the time to adopt said time frame rather than trying to put in, again, this effective multiplier? So for instance, they want a hero to last a year. Sure, can't LL in a year. It can accumulate points, right? We will guard it if need be, and then again, once that year clocks over, if they're past the living legend threshold, then fine, they LL, right? Something like that. Or you go a different way. You could do something like, if the hero LLs within the first year of its life cycle, we will take a hard look at its card pool. We will make sure that we get it on track, and then we'll put them back in at half their points. Right? There's lots of different scenarios for them to handle this directly, and therefore give the living legend system a better sense of control, right, in delivering certain standards for hero rotation, hero adoption, and hero performance. But instead, they're just continuing to try and tweak variables, and often that's just a short-term solution. So yeah, the more I think about it, again, I like the idea, I like what this is trying to do, but I don't necessarily think this is the correct way to handle it. If every hero was strong coming out of the gate, right, was a top performer, then this system would also kind of suffer, right? Because we'd have, again, all the new heroes being the new thing to try out, but also highly performing, and then halving the points with any given season. If the heroes are underwhelming from the jump, then there'll be slight adoption, right? People want to try something else, but then they find, again, it doesn't perform, so they go to whatever is currently the appropriate meta, and then eventually when those heroes have a much more functional toolkit, they might be subject to that higher multiplier. And then all of a sudden, yes, they've been around for a long time, but their actual play time is severely reduced, right? So it is a beautiful thing to give agency to the community, but there are also situations like this where I think LSS should be the one in control, right? And it should be to do more so with them controlling testing, banning, and that starting power level of heroes, because it's no surprise that, again, all the latest sets have had really strong heroes, right? It helps with sales, it helps with adoption, especially for talented heroes that, again, have a less functional card pool prior to their set, so you have to buy in the set, you have to buy in the singles, but again, that speaks to the variables. So yes, this will appease the situation, but it can also have negative repercussions, especially with that higher multiplier. So yeah, It's an interesting change. We'll have to see how effective it is, right? Again, it's something that needs to be looked long-term, more so than just the current period. So it should help with, obviously, Florian, for instance, not LLing too soon. Again, that's backed up by bans and restrictions, which, we'll go into shortly. But again, that other downside to discuss is armory decks, right? So an armory deck targets a low-sitting hero on the Living Legend board, right? Makes that hero playable. That hero now is suddenly subjected to that 1.5 times multiplier. So again, yes, it's been around for an applicable period that LSS wants, but its actual play lifespan could be severely reduced, right? But that aside, what do you think? Are you happy with this type of change? Again, I like the idea of some sort of barrier for new heroes, right? To me, the philosophy should be if a new hero performs too well, or again, dominates through popularity, then yes, that should be tweaked on a case-by-case basis, right? And should be backed up by bans and restrictions. But I don't know how I feel about the idea that, again, the structure of the Living Legend and the points per season going through these new multipliers, right? So, as for bans and restrictions, well, Count Your Blessings is gone, right? Count Your Blessings is no longer in Class Constructed or Blitz, right? And it doesn't seem like it will return because, again, community feedback, which is a beautiful thing to see. So Count Your Blessings is perhaps the most controversial card in Flesh and Blood's history. We have previously spoken favorably about Count Your Blessings' role in our game system. However, it is clear that while there are Count Your Blessing fans in the real world, there are also those that don't like the card, right? So yeah, if it was split down the middle, they'd hold the line, but community has spoken, community dislikes Count Your Blessing and what it does for the game. So bye-bye, right? Again, I'm not sore to see it leave. There's lots of decks that, again, I like to play that do benefit greatly from Count Your Blessings, but even I don't like putting Count Your Blessings in those decks because it doesn't feel like then the win is earned. It feels like, well, I'm just sitting and waiting till all my ducks in a row, right? And that's not the gameplay style that I feel should be rewarded in Flesh and Blood. Now, again, going to Florian, we have Germinate and Scepter of Pain banned. So, again, they are trying to rein him in. So along with the new Living Legend tweak, he will definitely be slowed down. So basically, Scepter of Pain was designed similar to Kraken's Aether Vein, which was prior to the existence of AMP, meaning that the way it works out functionally, right, can be a bit excessive. So Channel Millennial Tree is an AMP 5, so puts it to a 6, which is then 6 rune chance, so you're essentially double dipping on the AMP each time, right, which is just too valuable in a sense. Not to mention you can then stack the rune chance, and altogether, right, they feel it is necessary. It goes. Same with Germinate being too great of a functional card, especially in the late game if you're trying to wait out, and again, they're just going to amass life and rune chance. So yeah, understandable, but I don't think either of these changes are going to, put a direct pin in Florian, right? But I don't really play, so yeah, there we go. And then we have Bonds of Ancestry being unbanned since then is gone. So again, this to me goes back to the whole idea of we really should have specific bans, right? Bonds of Ancestry, clearly banned majorly because it's too broken in Zen, right? It's now back so that Klloo can use it and perform decently, right? So why not just from RIP? Ban it in Zen, allow Klloo people to still play Klloo, and in that scenario, going back to the Living Legend point distribution, well, you wouldn't have as many people jump ship from X hero, right? When, again, a ban hits the top performing and the middle performing hero. So, yeah, I continue to dislike the fact that they mention, right, splash damage in a sense. So Klloo receives some of the splash damage from all the Zen bannings, right? So, yeah, if you fully understand that, right, why not just go with it then? You understand that this card is more excessive in Zen than it was in Klloo, so it can go in Zen, but Klloo can still have his fun, right? And then for Blitz, we have Channel Lightning, Valley banned, Flicker Wisp banned, and Stormstrider's banned. So they're bringing down the hammer on Wizard and Runeblade, well, predominantly Aurora in this scenario, which again, Arcane is pretty rampant of a thing in Blitz, so this is definitely completely understandable, right? So along with Count Your Blessings, it should help temper the meta a little bit, right? And make a bit more alternate heroes a bit more viable. So overall, it's what we want to see. And then for Living Legend, Carrion Husk banned, Crown Seeds banned, Coal restricted, Deadwood Dirge restricted, Succumb to Temptation restricted, and Hypothermia unrestricted. But the big thing here is the fact that Living Legend will play a part in determining the world champion, right? So they are again, putting more emphasis on Living Legend by both way of the points and obviously by the bans and restrictions, trying to rein it in and make sure it's a bit more even of a playing field, which again is always going to be a sore point because you have X hero dominating X meta, right? And then again, if a meta underperforms, the heroes that LL during that time will just, for the sake of time periods, because again, going to the 1.5 multiplier, right? That means that Azalea doesn't have to win X amount of big events, it can be X amount of small events because the multiplier is in effect. So the same with Dash.io, or if we go to, you know, a more middle hero, it feels more like they're going to scrape by, right, and leave, rather than actually earning the triumph of being, again, a top performing hero, right? But yeah, in the case of Living Legend, they want to get Chain and Starvo back in line with the other heroes so that it is a fun experience rather than just, obviously, Stravos and Chain all representing Living Legend. So, as per usual, they do give a great rationale for a lot of their choices, which is always wonderful to see, right? Again, we like the level of transparency. And then lastly, for Commoner, Reality Refractor is banned, as at a rare level, it still outperforms other rare weapons, so to speak, right? But there we go. Bans and restrictions, again, the big thing is definitely the Living Legend change, right? So yeah, how do you feel about the multipliers? Again, to me, the first year, halved, sure, again, band-aid solution that needs to then just directly be backed up by bans and restrictions. But I do sort of feel that the 1.5 multiplier is a little bit rough, penalizing, again, a middle tier hero finally getting the cards it wants and deserves to perform well. I can also understand the other side of this scenario being that they want to get the old out, so that gives them a proper reason to invent the new, right? So, for instance, if we get a new adult version of Bravo, it can be a bit awkward if that then overshadows the original Bravo, right? But speaking of that, you also have headaches like Velda, for instance. So Velda, although, again, Mastery Pack Guardian being her pilot set, she's obviously released prior to that, so keeping track of that, again, and all these other promo heroes that, again, eventuate in a proper set, can be a little bit awkward, right? So, yeah, thanks for the agency, but I feel like you guys should be in control of, again, first-year heroes, right? Because think about the Aurora situation. As popular as she was, this would have then led to bans and restrictions. She'd still be playable, sure, but she would have also siphoned away a significant amount of points from the season, rather than, again, going towards her LLing. It's just, to me, the Living Legend system is such a influx system, right? You have increasing number of heroes, so how do you determine how many heroes you want to LL in a given year? You have the increasing growth of player and events, so how do you control how many points you want to give out, right? This just tacks on another variable to that again, I don't like as much as I'd like to. But there we go. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.